Welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I want to give you a list of 5 hidden gem horror films that I think are definitely worth your time. I feel like I've got a pretty good variety here, covering a handful of different subgenres. Before I get to the list, though, I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons, Milos, Dreamer Bailey, and Rick. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for supporting and help growing the beard. If you want to help me out, you can either become a YouTube member or a patron member. $3 a month gets you a shout out in all my videos, and also 24-hour early access to all of my videos as well. So let's get on to the list. First up is My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. This came out in 2020, and this one tells a story of these 2 siblings who are trying to take care of their younger brother who has come down with a very strange and mysterious illness. Now, part of the enjoyment with this one is the reveal as to what type of subgenre of horror film you're getting. And obviously, I'm not going to reveal it, but I really like how the director handles this subgenre and how he chose to present the film. And he presents the film in such a way that this is a very grounded, realistic portrayal. If something like this were to ever happen, you could see it kind of going down in this sort of way. And so because he goes with more of a grounded approach, this is really a dark kind of family drama. It's largely focused on the characters and specifically these 2 siblings being put in this really kind of impossible situation of having to care for their brother and not having a clue what to do or how to handle this situation. It's just a very dark, despairing, overwhelming situation, and all of those emotions and feelings really come through. Owen Campbell plays the sick younger brother. You may know him. He was in the movie X, directed by Ty West. His performance in this is fantastic. Really, really good. And so if you're interested in something that takes, just has a really sort of fresh, unique kind of twist and take on a subgenre of horror movie that we've seen many, many times, but not really ever done in this sort of way, with just a very intense, dark kind of family drama at its core, definitely check out My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. I think it is well worth your time. Next up on the list is a film called The Righteous. This was actually in like my top 5 or 6 horror movies of 2022, and still 2 years later, it is a film I don't think I've really seen anybody else talk about at all, and it's a shame because this is a pretty fantastic movie. Now, this is a religious horror film while also having some elements of mystery and thriller in there as well. And it tells the story of this older married couple who have just experienced this horrible tragedy, and they retreat to this like getaway cabin that they own just to kind of, get some space, get some time away. And then one night they are visited by this mysterious stranger. And this one, like I said, is a religious horror film, and I'm typically a big fan of religious horror. I just like all the themes and ideas that it usually brings up, and The Righteous is no exception. There's just a lot of really thought-provoking and compelling themes and questions that it brings up with, sin and punishment and grief and forgiveness and just all those different sorts of themes that really make it for a thought-provoking type of watch. Now, in addition to that, the visual presentation in this movie I think is fantastic. I'm a big fan of black and white just in general, and the black and white cinematography in this is awesome, just very stark, very high contrast, and that really kind of feeds into some more of the themes with, just morality and good and evil and right and wrong and stuff like that, but the visuals in this are phenomenal. And this is really a character-driven film first and foremost, as it largely focuses on the main older couple and their relationship and really what's going on inside of them, their inner turmoil and crisis of faith, and how the introduction of this mysterious stranger brings about just all these sorts of thoughts and feelings and ideas and stuff like that. It just really plays out in a very unique and I think fresh kind of way within this subgenre. So if you like religious horror with some thought-provoking themes, some really strong performances, and you're not turned off by the black and white, check out The Righteous. Next up on the list is an 80s slasher, and that is Intruder. This came out in 1989, and I have to say, before I get into it, if you plan on watching this one, do your best to avoid the poster, because believe it or not, the poster has a spoiler on it in that it gives away who the killer is. I couldn't believe they did that. I've never seen anything like it, but don't look at the poster unless you want it spoiled. Now, if you're a fan of slashers in general, especially 80s slashers, this is a must-watch. This thing is a whole lot of fun. And this one is really set entirely within this supermarket grocery store. And it's got this cast of characters who have to stay there overnight one night. I think they're like doing stock and inventory and something like that. And of course, a slasher killer is on the loose and starts picking them off one by one. And man, this thing is a lot of fun. It stars Sam Raimi, who you probably know directed the Evil Dead movies, so that's pretty cool. And it's just got some really good 80s slasher movie stuff in it. Got some really top-notch kills, some really top-notch practical effects. And yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? It's an 80s slasher that hardly anybody ever mentions when talking about other slashers from that decade. And yeah, definitely check out Intruder. It's a good one. Next up on the list is The Perfect Host. This came out in 2011 and was directed by Nicholas Tomney, who actually just released his latest film, What You Wish For, which just recently came out, and I've actually reviewed it on my channel, as I was a pretty big fan of that film. And so I was looking through his other films and found this one. Gave it a watch. Really glad I did, because I also quite enjoyed this one. And you can see some sort of similarities, especially just kind of the vibe and the tone of both of these movies are very similar. They feel like they were directed by the same guy. One of the things I said in What You Wish For was it's a really good film to go in absolutely blind, and I'm going to say the same thing about this movie. And so I'm going to be very brief and vague, giving you any sort of plot details with this one. But let me just start off by saying this one is worth the watch just for the performance by David Hyde Pierce alone. He steals the show, and I thoroughly enjoyed his performance in this movie. Real quickly though, this one tells a story of this guy who is on the run and is seeking refuge somewhere and happens upon David Hyde Pierce's house. And from that point on, this movie goes in some pretty wild and crazy directions that I can pretty much guarantee you will not see coming. Now, this one is a bit lighter on the horror, although there are still some horror elements. It's more of a dark comedic thriller, and the comedic angle works pretty well and really kind of fits well within the overall tone of the movie. He's able to weave the dark comedy, the thriller, the horror all together pretty well. This one is just fun to watch to see how it all unfolds, because like I said, you have no idea where it's going. It's very unpredictable. There's all sorts of twists and turns, and at the center of it is David Hyde Pierce's performance that is just a blast. And man, this guy just totally sells out and fully owns this role, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And my final hidden gem for you today is probably the least hidden out of all 5 of these, but it is still a film that I feel like is underseen and more people need to see, and that is Frailty. Yeah, this came out in 2001 and stars Bill Paxton. He also directed the film, and Matthew McConaughey as well. This is also another religious type horror film, but in addition to that, this is just a really compelling mystery. And the film starts off, Matthew McConaughey shows up at this FBI investigator's office who has been investigating these serial killings known as the God's Hand Killer. And from that point on, McConaughey tells this story of why he believes his brother is the God's Hand Killer. And so a lot of this film is presented in flashback as he tells his story of him and his brother growing up as kids, and Bill Paxton plays their father. And I really just like the type of presentation. A lot of times I'm not a big fan of flashback, but this is how you do flashback right. If you've seen the movie The Usual Suspects, which is one of my favorites, the type of presentation and how the story is presenting itself in Frailty is similar to that, where you've got just somebody recalling events and telling a story to an FBI officer, and that's how we get it. And so I really like how it uses the flashback. It builds that flashback type storytelling into the overall structure of the movie. Bill Paxton's performance is really good. I really like his character. He just has a very interesting and complex character, and your kind of feelings towards him, you kind of bounce back and forth. Frailty also has, I guess I'll call it a trope, but it's one of my favorite tropes, and that is the unreliable narrator trope, to where you're not sure how much truth you're getting and you know, what you're being told, and how much can you trust this versus, you know, what really happened versus, you know, what you're being told, sort of the whole perception versus reality thing. And in addition to that, being a religious horror, this one also has, I think, just some really kind of thought-provoking questions and ideas that I find really interesting. And then I'll just say the ending is phenomenal, and there's no possible way you can predict it, and I'll just leave it at that. So if you haven't seen Frailty, definitely check it out. It is pretty top-notch stuff. So those are 5 hidden gem horror movies for you. Hopefully there is at least 1 or 2 in there that you hadn't seen before. That's all I got for you today, though. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you got something out of this video, go ahead and do me a favor, and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.